Initiative Standing Committee to order, and we have regrets from Councillors McLeod and Madigan, and Deputy Mayor and Councillor Doherty will be joining me shortly, but we'll get going as we do have quorum. So today we acknowledge that this meeting is taking place on the traditional territory of the Indigenous peoples of Turtle Island. We are thankful to share in the special spirit of this place, rich in the energy of Mother Earth, our ancestors, and the love of all creation. And I will look for the motion to adopt the agenda. Who would like to move that? Councillor Berman, seconded by Councillor Jeffrey. The content of the Strategic Initiative Standing Committee agenda for May 28, 2019 be adopted as presented. Just to, before we vote, under 5.1, it's staff recommendation with staff report. It's D2019-13, not 12, so that's a correction there. And then under 5.8, Schedule B, I think it's been amended to Appendix B, and that will be addressed by Marguerite. So that being said, all in favor? That is passed. Declarations of pecuniary interest. Does anyone have a declaration? Seeing none, if you find yourself in that position, please let us know and state the general nature thereof. Deputation 4.1, preliminary development charge rates presentation. We have here from Hempson Consulting today. Hi, Jackie.
Here.
Good to see you.
Good to see you guys.
Come on up, please.
That's okay. You can just, I'll give you the thumbs up. Great. Well, it's a pleasure to be before yourselves again. If you don't remember, my name is Jackie Hall, and I'm from Collingwood Consulting. And we are the consulting firm that is tasked with updating your development charter staff around the study. So today, I just want to spend a little bit of time going through the overview of the study process. We touched on that a little bit last time we were here. I want to go over Bill 108, as I'm sure you all are very much so aware of the potential changes that are proposed through that particular piece of legislation. Talk a little bit about the development forecast. I'll touch base on the historical inventories and capital programs. But what I really want to hone in on today is the preliminary draft development charge rates that we calculated that will be included in the background study that we plan to release on Monday. So in terms of where we're at in the study process, what we want to do, or what the purpose of this meeting is today, as I mentioned, is just as an information session. We're here to also answer any sort of questions that you might have, and then if there's anything you need to follow up with yourselves on, we're more than happy to do so as well. Leading ourselves through the rest of this process, we're looking at June, as I mentioned on Monday, to actually formally release this study to the public. There's a 60-day requirement to have the background study published and released to the public in advance of final passage. So that will allow time for representatives of the public as well as the development industry to come back and ask questions, or perhaps we provide clarification on any of the assumptions or underlying calculation methodologies. Moving into July, we're going to be holding a statutory public meeting. So once again, that provides further opportunities for the public to make a comment. We'll respond to any sort of written submissions we receive. If there's anything that we can also respond to verbally at that meeting, we will do so. And then if need be, if there are any sort of things that we need to kind of tweak before the passage of the file itself, we'll make those adjustments, which will be reflected in a consolidated study that under the requirements of the Act actually has to go on your website. And as of right now, we're targeting a bylaw passage for August 26th, or perhaps a special meeting of council that might be sooner than that. Just to kind of go over how Bill 108 may impact, or is currently proposed to impact the development charge process. As most of you know, there was an announcement on May 2nd. 15 pieces of legislation are proposed to be amended through this, including the DCA and also the Planning Act, which is important because some of the elements of the development charges bylaw that you currently have in force could potentially be pulled out of that piece of legislation and then put into the Planning Act itself. The province, through this piece of legislation, actually said, you know what, we're going to provide an outright exemption for secondary suites and new units. We figured this was coming through early consultation that we have on this legislation. We were well aware of that, so that isn't a surprise. And really just to kind of touch base on what exactly that means. If you were to come in at time of building permit issuance, when you would pay development charge, as it stands right now, if you were proposing a secondary suite in a brand new unit, you would pay charges both on the primary dwelling as well as the secondary dwelling. Under this amendment to the legislation, that secondary dwelling would be exempt from the payment of development charges. We're also seeing that the legislation is recognizing also that they're not proposing to change the timing of when we do development charge updates. There could be a real cash flow challenge in terms of when they're frozen and when they're actually paid. So they freeze a building at site plan, but you're still paying at building permit issuance. The discounted services, so those are our soft or general services, including library, recreation, parks. All of those are actually proposed right now to be pulled out of the development charges bylaw and would then be put into what they're referring to as a community benefits agreement or community benefits bylaw. This would include both your cash in lieu, as well as cash in lieu for parkland dedication, as well as these rates for all these other services as well. Now, unfortunately, as you can see on the slide here, the regulations have not yet been released for Bill 108, and that's for a lot of the detail on exactly what this is. That being said, we are working with MFOA to put together a submission on behalf of all of our municipal clients, just talking about some of the issues that we ourselves find with the legislation. We also heard some rumors yesterday that perhaps the bill might get pushed out a little bit. The information that was posted suggested that it could actually go through third reading and also receive royal assent on June 4th. So obviously the timing with your study, it could be impacted. We're continuing with the population, which I would note we do account for through this background study process, because we recognize that those persons are creating increased pressure on your services, and we want to make sure that we're accurately reflecting that. We have 2 forecast periods in the background study. We have a 10-year for those general or soft services that I was just telling you a little bit about, water, roads, as well as your protection services, so fire and police. As part of this process and putting together the development forecast, we worked with available census data, so 2016 is the base year that we have, recent building permit information, as well as no development applications as well. This slide here is just providing an overview of kind of how we're showing things moving over those 2 benefiting periods. So we're working towards the permanent population target of the 33,400, as well as we're layering in that seasonal population. So you can actually see in 2031 there, at the very end of the planning period, your population with your seasonal would be closer to 43,000 persons. Employment is increasing at a relatively steady state, and it will achieve a target of 12,540 employees. And you might ask, some of these numbers that you see here on the slide before and what I'm showing on the slide are a little bit different. That's because under the legislation, we have to make adjustments for things like population undercount, as well as employees that work at home. So they actually come out. So that's why there might be a bit of a discrepancy between the numbers in those 2 slides. I showed this slide last time I was before you, but just to give a bit of an overview of the requirements of the process. So we are limited by historical service levels and maximum permissible funding envelopes for our soft or discounted services. Roads and related, we also calculate this for. However, it is extremely rare for a municipality to exceed their maximum permissible funding envelope for roads. The rationale being is that we already have such a large base of infrastructure, and recognizing that it's based on your prevailing service levels, oftentimes road service levels actually decline. They very rarely increase over time. And I'll just walk you through the top here just as one example. So library services, what we do is we calculate a historic service level or a historic rate per population for libraries specifically over the historic 10-year period leading up to the background study. So that would be from 2008 or 2009 rather to 2018. We take the infrastructure and the dollar replacement value, and then we divide it out by the population over that period, and we get what we call ourselves an average service level, which is the $458 per capita you see up there. The maximum permissible funding envelope is then determined by multiplying that out by the future population. The idea being that that's going to cap you at your current service level. And then the column on the very far right-hand side there is just intended to show you whether or not that's a full cost recovery service or a discounted service. So as you can see, library services is discounted, and under Bill 108, once again, if everything does go through as currently proposed, library services would actually be pulled out of this legislation altogether. Through discussions with staff as well as a review of the 2019 capital budget, we came up with capital programs We also chatted about this a little bit last time, but just to reiterate, basically the slide before you just shows the major capital infrastructure that is being proposed and brought into the rate calculations. I'll use library again as an example. In the library capital program, we have a provision for a new library. The cost for that facility is anticipated to be approximately $4.9 million. And the program also includes the recovery of past commitments, or what we would also call debenture payments. That was for your current library, where we are today, and we're still paying down about $5.3 million in principal for that facility. Engineered capital programs, this is where the bulk of your rate comes from, which I'll get to in the next slide actually, but just to kind of highlight where some of these projects came from. This was developed once again based on our review of your capital program. We've also been working really closely with Tatham Engineering, and they've been feeding in their analysis through other consultants as well. I believe Cole has been working with them on some of the water wastewater infrastructure projects. What we're proposing to do as part of this process, they're actually preparing a separate report with all the details of the capital programs, the assumptions and the costing that was used to arrive at the numbers you see for you on the slide and what you're going to see in our development charges calculations, and that will actually form a part of the appendix or an appendix to the larger background study itself. So that way we have backup for all of our numbers that we're basically bringing forward. And just to point out two kind of more critical projects, which I know have been kind of a hot topic in the town, under water facilities, we know we have the expansion of the water treatment plant, which is shared facility with New Tecumseh. The total gross cost of that project is about $51 million. However, the town share, as reflected in recent staff reports and through discussions with staff, is actually only 9.1, and that's a gross project cost. As well, we have the pollution control plant or the wastewater facility. That's proposed to be constructed towards the end of our planning period, closer to 2029, and that facility is quite substantial at $90 million. So, before you, I have on this slide the preliminary draft calculated residential and non-residential rates. The rates that I'm showing you here are based on the information we've received to date. We have vetted this with staff, we've had a couple iterations, but this by and large will be the rate that will be going into background study on Monday. The rates move from left to right from the residential, and we differentiate those by various unit types. So we have a rate for single and semi-detached. Other multiples, large apartments, which are defined as 2 bedrooms or more, or apartments which are 1 bedroom or less. If you look at the total charge line at the bottom, you'll see that those rates for the residential units vary based on the occupancy of those units. So we calculate a per capita rate, and then we multiply it out by the average occupancy. This is an approach that is used effectively by every single municipality in Ontario. So a single detached, for example, because it has an average higher occupancy, would pay more than, say, an apartment of 1 bedroom or less. And you might ask how this compares to your current rate, and I will show you that on another slide in a moment. The non-residential rate is calculated on a basis of $1 per square meter, and that total rate is calculated at $141.92. Now, the bulk of the rate, as I mentioned previously, is related to engineered services of water, wastewater, and roads. So if we're looking at the single detached rate of $30,620 per unit, $18,953 is related to engineered services, so about 62%. The remaining is what we call general services at just shy of $12,000, and that represents 38% of your charge. So how this compares to your current enforced calculated rate. If I was to go to the counter today and I was being issued a building permit, I would pay for a single detached unit $24,572. If the bylaw is passed as currently proposed, recognizing once again that there might be some changes, especially if Bill 108 receives royal assent in advance of your bylaw being passed, we have calculated a rate of $30,620, or an increase of 25%. The bulk of that increase is related to general services, and I'll get into in a couple slides why that is. And the engineered services, we've seen either a slight decline or an increase for water services specifically. Water services, my understanding is that that has increased because there's been an update to the water master plan. We've done some more rigorous analysis in terms of the infrastructure needed. to service development over our identified planning periods. And roads and related and wastewater services hasn't, in terms of the most recent updates, we haven't seen that type of correction. Now, non-residentially, I wanted to show you guys two different types of tables. The rationale being, or the reason being, is that as part of the 2014 development charge bylaw, the fully calculated rates were not implemented for non-residential services or non-residential development. So as it stands right now, your current non-residential charge is $68.78 per square meter. We have calculated a rate much more significant than that at $141.92 a square meter. So that effectively shows an increase of 170%. That's the blue box at the top there. That being said, if we were to take your 2014 rate as it was calculated and index it to 2019 dollars, your rate today would actually be $145.03. So compared to what we have calculated, it would actually be a very slight reduction in the rate. That being said, you did not implement the 2014 charge, so I just wanted to show it for comparative purposes to help illustrate we're not seeing these huge shifts, technically speaking, in the non-residential rates. What effectively was done in the last bylaw update was that council approved a discount of the non-residential rate. So just to provide some explanation as to why rates have been increasing, and I know there are some reasons as well laid out in the staff report that is prepared as part of this. Construction costs have been increasing at a rate higher than indexing or inflation. Developers also have told us that as well, so we're aware of, they tend to be aware of that. Land values, we've seen upward pressure on the price of land. With the new requirements that came out through the asset management practices that municipalities are required to do in order to maintain their gas tax spending, we've actually seen a much more robust analysis of the general services, which is putting some upward pressure on that. Effectively, if you have a much more better inventory analysis, your base is increased, and therefore your historic level of service, it's more accurate, but it also tends to be larger. We've also seen that there is very good comprehensive capital planning that's been going on. In recent years, the town has undertaken quite a significant amount of capital planning and master plans, including a waterfront master plan, doing infrastructure updates. So once again, updating those capital costs also has a bit of an upward pressure as well. As part of the 2019 Development Charge Bylaw update, we will also be going through the bylaw. We've initiated dialogue with staff on this to review current policies, definitions, exemptions, etc. So right now, in terms of non-statutory exemptions, the town provides an exemption for boards of education, municipalities or local boards, hospitals, places of worship, and non-residential farm buildings. Obviously, you're also providing a discount to your non-residential builders as well, because the rates were not fully implemented as part of the last bylaw. And we'll be bringing forward policies in a draft 2019 bylaw that will be made available 2 weeks in advance of the public meeting. So that will become public sometime in July. And just to kind of close out about critical next steps, as I mentioned, we're releasing back on Monday. The statutory public meeting, we're actually targeting for late July. I believe we're aiming for July 22nd. And then the passage of the bylaw, recognizing that your bylaw expires the first week of September, we have to have a new bylaw in force in order to allow you to continue to collect development charges. So we're anticipating to pass it at the meeting of council on August 22nd or 26th or sooner. And that concludes the formal delegation.
Thank you. This is the Strategic Initiatives Committee meeting, so I don't know if there's any members of the public that would like to have any questions or comments before I hand it over to the council for questions or comments. Seeing none, I will open up questions or comments for council. Councilor Hammond.
Thank you. You mentioned that in terms of calculating the residential development charge for the various categories that you used a per capita basis, and that was common in small municipalities. What is the alternative approach if we were to consider it?
So to clarify, it's a good question. Effectively every municipality in Ontario calculates the residential charges on a per capita approach. Our firm actually has tried to test alternative approaches, and unfortunately the Ontario Municipal Board, or LPAT, sort of alternative other than the use of per capita or per capita and employee. One question I get asked all the time is, well, why don't we calculate the rate on a square meter basis for the residential users as we do for the non-res? And it's a good question. However, we find it actually is very difficult to administer that type of charge under the requirements of the legislation. The rationale being is that we have to create a nexus between the development that is occurring and the capital infrastructure that is needed to service that development in the future. So master plans, for example, for library facilities are often based on population, which therefore requires us to do the relationship based on per capita. We also find that through our review of Statistics Canada data available in terms of occupancy, a 1,000 square foot single detached house has the same occupancy as a 3,000 square foot single detached house. It's a very interesting relationship, but effectively just because you have a larger house doesn't mean you have more people. And if we're saying people are is what's driving the service, we can't create the relationship on a GLA basis.
I just have a follow-up question, Mr. Meredith, for you. So that last point you made is exactly the one that I'm thinking about, which is same unit has the same number of people. So what's on my mind is the difference between the one bedroom and less, or the two bedroom and more, because obviously when housing costs are high, you get more people into the smaller units because they're cheaper to rent or to buy. And I wasn't sure if there was a way to even out, that, or to make it, as attractive to build a two bedroom, because every community needs more units with more bedrooms. Is there any way you can think around that problem?
It's an excellent question. So through the development charges process, we calculate the rates that are permitted under legislation. If a municipality would like to come forward and provide an exemption to, say, incentivize a specific type of unit, so say large bedroom or multi-bedroom apartments, that is considered a non-statutory exemption, and it actually has to be recouped through other revenue sources. So if we provide a discount, so on if we go back to slide 9, if the two-bedroom apartment rate is calculated at $19,993, if say we provided an exemption of if you build apartments that are 2 bedrooms or larger or 3-bedroom units, you only pay 50% of that. You have to make up the difference through other revenue sources, so say property taxes. So it does put municipalities in a bit of a tricky situation because you want to incent these types of developments. However, through the Development Charges Act, you actually have to make it up. So our typical suggestion is that development charges may not be the most appropriate mechanism. And in fact, looking in our discussions with the industry, we have found that they suggest that actually having a host of different incentives is much more enticing in terms of trying to build a specific type of unit. So if you were to provide, some sort of benefit in terms of property taxes as well as DCs, as well as, discount in terms of building permit application fees, that suite of packages or that toolbox seems to kind of tip the scales a little bit better with respect to their performance.
So could I ask one more question? Sorry, Mr. Mayor, as well. On the same point, because I just want to know if there's some way we can get at this. So you're not using per capita on singles or semis, but you do for the 1 bedroom plus and 2 bedroom and more. And I'm just wondering, does anyone ever?
Right. So through the chair, if I may, actually as part of this analysis in terms of what we're coming up with for the bylaw itself, perhaps we can work with staff and just provide a couple of examples of what's been done elsewhere. Some municipalities do look at perhaps apartments or units that have an occupant types of units as well. So as part of the policy process, we can work with staff and perhaps bring something forward on that.
Thank you very much.
Council, any questions? Councilor Doran.
Charge, the increase in library, that you referenced that was because we would anticipate a second facility. And then I'm wondering why parking, although it's not a huge sum, I'm wondering why that is there at all. Because if it's public parking, normally it's revenue generating, so I don't understand why we would include it in the DCs.
That's the chair. The parking revenue is typically used to offset the operating costs, so the ongoing maintenance and repair of those assets. If there were any costs going towards the actual capital, the initial round of capital infrastructure itself, we would actually deduct that from the eligible amount. Was that after a parking facility is constructed, that's when the revenue occurs, so it makes sense that it goes to the ongoing maintenance of that asset. Leading up to the actual construction of the facility, it's often not a full cost recovery.
So just hypothetically, because council has the ability to discount these rates, hypothetically to a certain type of residential unit that we are encouraging, so as an example, multi-bedroom rentals as an example, and then parking charges on an ongoing basis could be increased such that we could recoup the cost of the construction of the parking space plus the ongoing maintenance of the space. Is that something that could happen?
Through the chair. So in terms of actually, say you were to remove the parking service altogether, that discount couldn't be transferred to another type of discount. So that's not an option. In terms of how you actually structure the recovery of your parking fees, that would be something that would need to be dealt with through a separate study.
Okay, thank you.
So if I can just pick up on Councilor Doherty's questioning, we look at that, that's 100% of the pie. So if you reduce or remove any aspect of that, then you have to find another place to recoup that.
Correct.
So at the end of the numbers there, if you pull out a line item or reduce any aspect of those numbers, you have to tack something on some other classification to get yourself back to that bottom line number.
That is correct. Now, I would just add, if I may, just Bill 108 is effectively going to impact all of the general services above that whole line. So that would include parking, with the exception of transit. Transit is that one service